Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you again. Tuesday, March 30th, 2021. All this week we've been thinking about the final week of our Lord's earthly ministry. And I guess everybody knows on Sunday that he was riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. Crowds were cheering. He went through the eastern gate into Jerusalem and then went back out of the city later in the day and spent the night in Bethany. But what about Monday of that week? What was he doing? We saw that yesterday. They made their way from Bethany back into the city when they had a very strange experience. That it was early, they hadn't had breakfast, they were hungry, and saw a fig tree. So Jesus went over to the fig tree. There were plenty of leaves, but there was no fruit. The next thing they know, Jesus is yelling at this fig tree and places a curse on it. And then they went into the city. He cleansed the temple and went back and stayed in Bethany once again. What about on Tuesday? What happened then? Well, let me share with you Mark chapter 11, 20 to 26. I'll tell you one thing that happened on Tuesday, the final week of our Lord's ministry. It says in verse 20, in the morning, as they passed by, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, calling to remembrance, saith unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursedst is withered away. And Jesus answering saith unto them, Have faith in God. For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith. And therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire, when you pray, believe that ye shall receive them, and ye shall have them. And when you stand praying, forgive, if you have aught against any, that your Father also which is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father which is in heaven forgive your trespasses. So after spending another night in Bethany, it's Tuesday, early morning, they're headed back into the city, and apparently they take the same route, and there's that same fig tree, but it's dead. It was cursed in verse 14 of the same chapter. On Monday morning, it appeared healthy and just full of green leaves, and 24 hours later, it was dried up and dead. And Peter remembered, our text says. Mark received his information from Peter, and so one of the interesting things about the Gospel of Mark is we know things Peter was thinking as they happened. So the shocking part was that this plant dried up so quickly. It doesn't normally happen. And so he asked Jesus about this. And Jesus gives him an answer that has nothing to do with the fig tree. But it was the answer he needed to hear. I mentioned yesterday there are two reasons why Jesus did this. I think one was to give them an object lesson of the importance of bearing fruit and not just appearing uh, to be Christians. But the second reason, I think the most important reason, is what we see here. Jesus is going to be leaving his group of disciples, and they're the ones responsible for establishing his church on earth. And they needed to be men of faith and men of prayer. And that's why Jesus doesn't even mention the fig tree when Peter asks about it. He gives them an important lesson about prayer and faith. That's the point of emphasis here. Obviously, God is the object of this kind of powerful faith. To have faith in God. And if you have faith in God, I mean, what else would it be but powerful? He says, This mountain. They were standing on the Mount of Olives. I think that's probably the mountain we're talking about here. And if you have faith, it'll be cast into the sea, most likely the Dead Sea. It was a drop of about 4,000 feet. Now, the Lord didn't say why anybody would want to do this, but the point is, it's impossible. In fact, it's not even thinkable. And yet, Jesus said they could do it. The reality is, if you look at the disciples over the past 3 years, they had been doing things that were impossible. Peter had walked on water. The 12 were able to cast out demons. And Jesus takes what they've been doing and applies it to something that is even beyond what had happened so far. If you believe and you do not doubt, well, doesn't it seem logical that if we have faith in God, we will not doubt? What else would you expect? And yet we do doubt, don't we? I think it's one indication of how little we trust in God so often. If God is the object of our faith, why would we impose any limits on what he can do? You see, this kind of faith is more than just thinking, well, if it's God's will, he'll do it. But it means that the believer who's praying has no doubt whatsoever that what he's asking is in God's will. I realize sometimes that we don't get what we ask for in prayer because we need to pray in God's will. We need to be in a right relationship with him. But most often I think our problem is that we don't pray. You have not because you ask not. Sometimes we sing, oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. I wonder how much you're missing today because you don't pray. Is it pride that keeps you from crying out to God, that you just can't handle the situation alone? Does the unbelief in your heart convince you that maybe God is just too big to be bothered with your little requests? Well, prayer is the means that God has chosen to accomplish his will on this earth. Didn't have to do it that way, but he chose to use prayer, our little prayers, to accomplish his will. What makes victorious faith so powerful? Well, one is that the object of victorious faith is in God himself. That removes all limits. Secondly, the intensity of victorious faith removes any doubt that this will happen. If it's God's will, we know it is. We ask and we know that we'll receive. And thirdly, the expression of victorious faith is prevailing prayer. I want to ask you today, do you have any mountains you'd like to move this morning? This is the time to bring those to him. See you tomorrow.